everybody. Welcome back to the Menlo Circus Club. I'm Mike Adams, the executive chef here. And today is all about gnocchi. One of my favorite recipes, something I absolutely adore making. First and foremost, shout out to Dirk behind the camera. Give us those 2 fingers. And Robin behind the computer making us all look good. So we didn't have any questions from last week, so I'm just gonna assume that everybody's an expert at cooking fish now and we can move on. If you do have any questions, reach out to me, M-I-C-H-E-L-A at MenloCircusClub.com. It's spelled a little differently than Michael, so M-I-C-H-E-L-A at MenloCircusClub.com. So why gnocchi? This class is called Cooking Essentials. Gnocchi is not an essential skill, so why are we doing it? I know chefs that have probably gone their entire career and have never made gnocchi. It's not that common, really, anymore. For me, growing up in the kitchen, it was something that everybody learned how to make, and you learned how to make it earlier in your career. And I think that's why we're gonna focus on it today. Really, gnocchi is about the process. We are gonna take we're gonna take a starch, which is, if overprocessed, chewy. We're gonna take a gluten, which if you overprocess it, is chewy. And we're gonna try to make something that's light and delicate out of 2 chewy items. Thomas Keller in the French Laundry Cookbook, there's 1 page in there dedicated to cleaning artichokes. And this was really important to me early on in my career. It's about finding joy in the mundane. Because yeah, it's easy to clean 1 artichoke or 2 artichokes. But when you're cleaning a case of 100 baby artichokes, that takes time. And really, perfection is all about taking your time, enjoying that time that you have, and really focus on every little detail of what you're doing, and that's what's gonna make you a great cook. And that's why we're making gnocchi today. I want you to get lost in the process. This is not a quick, get home from work, throw it together, have dinner 30 minutes later recipe. This is gonna take you a couple hours. This is a Sunday recipe. This is a recipe that you're gonna wanna do with your family, that you're gonna wanna include your family. It's fun for little kids. I know a lot of our new members, there's a lot of new younger kids at the club. Get them involved. Get your spouse involved. This can be broken down into steps so everybody has a job. It's a great way to bring the family together, which is really what cooking is all about. The essence of cooking is gathering people together around the table or gathering people around the cutting board and sharing an experience. So let's get going. You're gonna need a couple of special tools for this one. Check out Sur La Table, Williams-Sonoma, webrestaurantstore.com. They all have them. The first and foremost tool that you're gonna need is either a ricer or a food mill. Now, this is an industrial food mill. It's a little bit bigger than what you need, but you absolutely need this to make a good gnocchi, and I'll tell you why. A ricer is a little bit smaller. It still has the small holes, but it's more of a press. Kind of like a large garlic press. That's exactly what it is, actually. So if you look at the bottom of this, there's a whole bunch of little holes, and it's the same thing on a hand ricer. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cook our potatoes. We're gonna push them through these holes. The reason we wanna do that is by extruding them, we're not gonna develop the starch in the potato. Because if you ever made mashed potatoes and you just mix them and mix them and mix them too much and they're kind of gummy and chewy, that's what we wanna avoid. And that's what this piece of equipment's gonna do for you. I've never made gnocchi without one of these or without a hand ricer, so I can't really tell you a way to get around that. Dirk?
Grater.
Grater, box grater. There you go. Box grater will work too. You're gonna need a microplane. What this is, it's just a very fine grater. Do you absolutely need it? No. Is it gonna help? Yes. And the reason being is we're gonna be putting some Parmesan cheese in this, and we wanna microplane it because we wanna keep all of our ingredients very delicate. Just microplane, about 1.5 cups or so of cheese, very fine. If you don't have a microplane, smallest setting on your box grater is going to work as well. A bench knife, or a baker's knife, or a board knife, whatever you want to call it. This is not completely essential, but as you'll see, it's going to be very helpful in the process of mixing and scraping. A bowl scraper, if you can get one, it's one of my favorite tools. And the most important thing is going to be your work surface. We're going to get a little messy. You want to make sure you have plenty of space, but more importantly, you want to have a space that's smooth, preferably wood. If you have marble or granite countertops at home, that will work just fine without any issues. Wood is best because it's got a little bit of porosity to it, and it's going to grab onto that dough and help you roll it out. If you don't have it, no worries, but it's got to be flat and it's got to be smooth. If at home, if you have tile countertops, put a cutting board out and work on the cutting board. That will work as well. So that's our special equipment that we're going to need. Let's get the process going. So anytime I start gnocchi, first thing I'm going to do is put a large pot of water on the stove and just slowly start to bring it up to a boil. When I'm done shaping the gnocchi, I need that water ready to go. I don't want to wait. I also want to be able to use that water to test my gnocchi before I finish the product. We're going to start with our potatoes. This is a medium-sized russet potato. You want about 5 to 6 of these, depending on the size. If they're larger, go 4. If they're smaller, go 6 or 7. So why russets? This is an essential gnocchi ingredient in my book. Russets have less starch than, let's say, Yukon Gold does, or even a red potato, which is super starchy. And they break down a little bit better without smearing and developing that starch. So you want to use russets. So we're going to take about 5 to 6 of these. Sheet tray, container, casserole dish, and you're just gonna put them on there. Literally, just put them on the tray, put them in the dish, and put them in an oven. If you have a convection oven, 375, depending on the strength, 400. If you have a roasting oven, 400 to 425, and you want to bake these until they're soft. Show you what we have. I did a little extra just to kind of make sure. Oh wow, I had a potato explode in the oven. Never seen that before. So you see I put a wire rack under mine. Gets more convection. They're probably going to cook a little faster. If you don't have the wire rack, that's fine. You're going to take a small knife and just insert it and just make sure they're soft. If you overcook these, that's fine. They're still usable. You just want them to be cooked in the inside. So now is probably the hardest part, because we need to process these potatoes while they're still warm. My advice, if you have heavy duty rubber gloves at home, put on a pair of gloves, because we're going to work with these potatoes while they're straight out of the oven. If you want to wait 5 or 10 minutes to let them cool down a little bit, that works as well. If you don't have rubber gloves at home, what you can do is you can take a towel, hold the potato in the towel, and work it that way. What we want to do is we're going to kind of cut the ends off, and we're going to peel away what we call in the kitchen the jacket. Where that term came from, I don't really know, honestly. And you're going to end up with this. Now, the reason we're working with these potatoes hot is because I want to reduce the amount of moisture that is in these potatoes. I want to get all that water out, because that water, it's just taking up space. That water could be eggs, it could be cheese, and it's just going to mean more flavor. So I'll do about 6 of these. And this takes a little bit of time. It's hot, it's really hot. Take your time and get lost in the process. Really, that's what this recipe is all about. There's 1,000 ways you could do this. Let me try something that I've never done before. You could take these potatoes and probably cut them in half and squeeze the insides out, and that might be faster. So we've done 2, 4, 5, and we're gonna do one more. Now, if you notice, I'm working on a piece of parchment. Reason for that, it just makes things easier transporting these, and I'll show you why. It also kind of keeps my cutting board clean. Jackets, I'm gonna take these and I'm gonna throw them away. I still haven't really found a use for those. Crispy potato skins, they don't really work because they're kind of dry. So let's just get rid of them. It's just the skin on a potato. We peel potatoes and we throw it in the trash all the time. So from there, while they're still hot, we're gonna transfer the potatoes to our food mill or our ricer. And this is why I like to use the parchment, because I can just pick it up, dump it in, and we're good to go. And I'm gonna rice these directly on to my surface. Try to get every bit. Good tip when using a food mill, once you've got everything through, go back one time and do it again. Now, as they sit here, they're gonna steam off. What that means is they're gonna give off water. We wanna get that water out of here because that's gonna get in the way of everything we're trying to do. So at this point, our potatoes are done. They're riced. We're gonna spread them out a little bit. Just to get more steam off. We're gonna let them cool for about 5 or 10 minutes. Just let them come down to temp because we're gonna be adding some eggs to them. We don't want them to cook the eggs. They're gonna be easier to work with. We wanna get more of that moisture out. So our potatoes have cooled down a little bit, and we're literally just gonna add the rest of our ingredients. No specific order to this. Gonna a little bit, and I'm gonna leave them out. We're gonna process it on the table. It's probably about a tablespoon of salt. Gonna add, where's my microplane? A couple grates of nutmeg. With the nutmeg, you can leave it out if you don't like nutmeg. Really, we're not trying to taste the nutmeg. It's just gonna add a little background note to it, because there's not a lot going on, so we want to develop that flavor. Flour, about 1.5 cups, I would say. It may require more. It's hard to tell. It really depends on the amount of moisture in the potatoes, the amount of moisture in your ricotta. It's gonna vary. Ricotta cheese. Pull off some excess moisture. This is gonna really affect the amount of flour you use. So this is Di Stefano ricotta. It doesn't have a lot of moisture in it. Your skim milk ricotta, I don't think has a lot of moisture in it. If you get something like Bellwether Farms, which is really awesome, it's really wet, so you're gonna want to add a little bit more flour to that. So we're just gonna add that in.
Chef, today's supposed to be about 104 degrees outside.
Oh, a perfect day for gnocchi. What were we thinking?
Does the temperature or the weather have an effect on your dough?
You know, there's a lot of debate over that. If you're making bread, absolutely. Temperature is gonna force the yeast to leaven. I would say yes, it's better to do this, as it's better to do everything in life in a 62-degree room. But it's gonna be a little bit softer the hotter it gets. It's just natural thermodynamics. But this is a small enough recipe, it's not really gonna affect it. You're doing this in your house. Hopefully you have air conditioning if you live down here in Atherton, unlike us.
In the kitchen.
East Bay, or in the kitchen. You can see I'm sweating today.
It's a bit warm.
So we've got our salt, we've got our ricotta, our Parmesan cheese, our nutmeg, and I'm gonna crack a couple of eggs on here, and this is where we start to mix. Now, the key to a good gnocchi is not to overmix, because the more you mix, the more you develop gluten, the more you develop starch. Now let's say you added too much flour. How would you know? You're not going to know until we're about 50% done. And all you can do at that point, you can add another egg, but make a mental note that next time you're gonna add a little less flour. This is all a process. See, I'm gonna grab it and I'm gonna pinch it and I'm gonna see how it comes together. That seems very wet. And you see how it's sticking to my fingers. But that's okay because everything's not fully incorporated yet, so it's okay to be a little wet. So this is the messy phase. The one part I don't like. Before I get started, I'm actually gonna turn my water up because I want it to come up to a full boil by the time I'm done. With the water, it should taste like lightly salted seawater because that is another chance for you to get salt into that gnocchi. So now we're gonna start processing and I'm gonna fold, mix, fold, mix, fold. And I'm just gonna keep this process going. And then I'm gonna get my hands involved and we're gonna almost knead it. And yeah, your hands are gonna get super dirty and that's okay. Take my scraper and I'm gonna bring everything back together. And we are gonna mix this until it is just comes together. And I'm actually, see how it's sticking to my hands? That means it's a little wet. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more flour to it, not a lot. Little goes a long way. So if you look at the dough itself, it's mixed, but you still see there's a little spot of egg there, spot of egg there, spot of cheese there. It's not overly mixed. It still fractures when I pull it apart. That's what we want. Any more, because we're gonna mix it a little bit more when we're rolling. So at this point, we are going to clean our work surface off because it makes it a lot easier to roll. And I'm gonna go clean my hands because it's really hard to roll with dirty hands. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we've got our dough ball mixed up. I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna clean off all my tools and you can just scrape them against each other. Put that off to the side. And we're gonna start rolling. So the first thing I wanna do is make sure my water's hot. And just the way I've always done it, I'll dump a little pile of flour out on my table. That way. And I'll sprinkle out a little flour. And I'm gonna take a little bit of my gnocchi dough. We're gonna roll it out. So the secret here is to use this section of your hand. When you get your fingers involved, you get little indentations. So you wanna go from the top of that first knuckle, you draw a line straight across, it's all flat, and you wanna use that. Getting both hands involved, same thing. Take your time. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be delicious. There's a difference. And I'm gonna try to roll this out to a log, probably about 5/8 of an inch, half an inch, 3/4, whatever you can get to.
Rulers are not required.
Rulers are not required at all. And we're gonna stop right there. That is a good shape. So my water's about to boil. I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna cut some pieces off. Now you see a lot of traditional gnocchi makers, traditional Italian gnocchi makers. I'm not gonna just say gnocchi makers because there's a French gnocchi, quote unquote. They run their gnocchi on a border on the back of the fork. I don't really do that. The whole point of putting those score lines in it, I'm sure you've seen it. It kind of looks something like that. It's fancy. It's this weird shape. If you want to go that far, go for it. Really, the whole point of that is to hold sauce when you're cooking it in a sauce. I will generally just make little pillows, and we will use those. So this is my test batch. Before I proceed any further, I want to make sure that this batch of gnocchi works, because if I'm going to shape all of this out and spend the time rolling it and the time cutting it, and I go to cook it and it just disintegrates, that's a heartbreaker. You can still fix this if it doesn't work. So my water is coming up to a boil. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my bench knife, pick these up, and I'm going to drop them in the water, and I'm going to see what they do. Just give them a quick stir, and I want to see how they cook. Take a couple of minutes to cook. A general rule, after they float, give them another 30 seconds and they're good to go, because that means that they've developed the air pockets inside them from the cooked eggs. I will usually start them off in lightly boiling water, and then once that water hits a boil, they're generally done, honestly. They usually start to float around there. These are looking amazing right now, but don't be fooled. I've had gnocchi completely separate out once that water gets hotter, once the inside starts to cook. So we'll let these go for a little bit more. You see they're starting to float a little bit. Wait till they float. I'm gonna assume that they're gonna work, so while those are cooking, I'm gonna section off another piece of dough, and another piece of dough, and another piece of dough, so we can roll those out. These are going to be super light and super delicate, I can tell you that, just by the feel of the dough. So those hold together really well. They're super delicate. How do we know if they're done? Well, I will take a sharp knife and I'll cut it down the middle. And let's look at this. If you look at the inside of that, you've got cooked dough with air pockets, and then right in the middle, you've got a little bit of raw dough. That means it's not ready to go. Also gives me a chance to check my salt. It's a little undersalted, so if you don't have enough salt in there, you can add more salt to your water now, and that's going to infuse it. So those weren't done. So we're going to do another test batch with these. We let these cook for another minute or another 30 seconds or so. We're going to cut another one open. And we are there. You see, you start to get little pockets of air throughout the entire thing. And they're gonna cook just a little bit more when they're outside. So if you've got a small dot of white in the middle, that's great. All right, so let's move on. Our water's at a boil. We needed to add more salt to that. We're gonna do that. It's all personal taste preference, and I'm gonna show you how the best way to process this gnocchi. So once again, clean cutting board. Work with whatever size dough you're comfortable working with. You know, I can do much larger pieces because I've done this so many times. I'm gonna roll this out. Now, if you find that your dough is sliding around while you're trying to roll it out, you've got too much flour. If you find that it's sticking while you're trying to roll it out, you either have a dirty work surface or not enough flour. So we're gonna roll one. You take your time, enjoy this. Now let's say we cook those gnocchi off and they completely fell apart. Well, that just means that I gave you a bad recipe. No, what it means is there was probably too much moisture in there, and what I would do is I would add just a little bit of flour to that. And that would absolutely fix the problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out about, I'm not going to do all this dough today just because I want to show you the process. I'm going to roll out about 3 pieces, and then I'm going to lightly flour my workspace. I'm going to bring them back to me. Make sure they're all kind of the same size, and I want to line up one end. Do the same thing here. Line up an end, and then I'm going to sprinkle a little bit more flour on top. Sharp knife, clean knife, very important. It's got to be clean. Cut that end off. And we're going to cut them about an inch long. It's a little bit bigger than an inch, whatever you prefer. And remember, they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be delicious. That's all we're going for. So with this, we're gonna take all these scraps, we're gonna put it in a small pile, and we're gonna knead it back together towards the end with all our scraps. So we have these gnocchi rolled out. And the way I I like to do this is take the back of a sheet pan. I'm going to line these up on the back of the sheet pan. Now, for this recipe, maybe 2 sheet pans, depending on the size of your sheet pans. And we're going to cook these probably in 2 or 3 different batches. You don't want to crowd the pot because you need to give that gnocchi area to swim. Pot this size, I'd cook maybe just a little bit more than this at a time, but not much. So from here, what I can do is I can take that pan over to my pot, and using my bench knife, I'm going to slide those into the pot. And we're going to let those cook. Now, as you've done this more and more, you'll find that while those are cooking, you can roll more dough. It really depends on the setup of your kitchen. When you get them in the pot, give them a little stir, just because you don't want them to settle on the bottom. What are we going to do when they're done? Well, I'm going to show you very quickly how to saute some gnocchi. It's one of my favorite preparations for it, and it's one of the ways really I'm known for making gnocchi. If you want, put all this time in where you've doubled the batch, put them on a small sheet tray, put them in the freezer. Once they're frozen solid, you can put them in a plastic bag, and next time you feel like gnocchi, take them out, let them defrost a little bit, blanch them in some water. This is after they're cooked. Blanch them in some water, saute them in a pan, and then your gnocchi is ready to go. This product, this method, after it's been cooked and frozen, is really delicious. It's almost just as good as fresh. You can take them out of this liquid and throw them into a tomato sauce, and you're good to go. I'll include a recipe for a very simple, very delicious tomato sauce in the link. And really, that tomato sauce is just about quality tomatoes. You can saute them, you can save them for tomorrow. They last in the walk-in probably 2, maybe 3 days. So once they're chilled, get them in the freezer if you're not going to use them right away. So we're going to give those about another minute. While those are cooking, I'm actually going to start the preparation. So, very important, non-stick pan. It was apparently hot. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit of butter, maybe a tablespoon and a half. I'm going to throw that in the pan. Take some sage leaves. Just kind of break those up in the pan, and I'm going to put this on the stove. I'm going to start to brown that butter very slow while we're waiting. At home, these don't need to go directly from the water to the pan. I don't want to give you that impression, but just for video time's sake, we're going to go that way. So we're going to check one of our gnocchi. Take it, cut it. Oh, perfectly cooked all the way through. So we're going to take them out of here. Throw them on a sheet tray. Now, like I said, you could throw these directly into a tomato sauce. If you're planning on sauteing them, I would pop them in the walk-in for maybe 20 minutes and then saute them, or maybe use them in tomato sauce today and 2 days from now, saute them and get a little bit of crispiness on them. For us, for our application right now, we're going to go straight from the hot water to the pan. And it will affect how they brown a little bit. It's better to let them chill down just a little bit. So I've got a little bit of butter, some sage, some lemon zest, some cream, a little bit of salt, and if you want to get fancy, a little bit of truffle oil or fresh truffles. The other good thing about this recipe is you can add 1,000 ingredients to that. I'll cover that in just a second. So my butter is melted. My sage is starting to fry a little bit. Why don't I move this out of the way? And I'm going to add some gnocchi to this. We're just going to put a little color on here. We're going to saute them over medium-high heat. One case, medium heat is not your friend. Until they develop a little bit of color.
good.
Yeah. So if you see, we're starting to get a little bit of caramelization on the gnocchi. We're not going to get as much as we would normally get just because I didn't chill them down. But just put a little bit of color on these. Put them to a higher heat. So while these are cooking, we're going to take our trusty microplane. We're going to add a little bit of fresh lemon zest. And let that fry up in the oil a little bit. See, we're starting to get some good caramelization on the outside, and the secret with this is just keep them moving in the pan. Let them sit for 10 seconds. Let them sit for 10 seconds. Give them a shift around. You know, really, if you want to get crazy about it, you can sit here and flip them all individually. That's really not worth the time. So we've got some good color on those. We're going to add a pinch of salt. Now, at this point, we could add some rendered pancetta, some rendered bacon, some corn that's already been sauteed off, English peas that are blanched, fava beans, mushrooms. You can add 1,000 things to this. That's what makes it so versatile. But to finish, we're going to add a little bit of heavy cream. We're going to reduce that cream down into a sauce. Check your salt. Make sure you can taste the lemon in there. Clean up my workspace. So that cream, we want to reduce it by about half to there. Now let's say, oh, I was off doing something else, and this is something we talked about in the first episode, and I over-reduced my cream, and now I have this blotted mess. What are you going to do? Add a little bit of water to that, and it's going to re-emulsify the milk solids and the fat, the butter fat in that cream. So those are done. We're going to take a nice little bowl, and I mean, you can use the spoon to take them out, but you can just pour them out into a bowl or onto your serving plate. And what I would do, once again, back to the microplane, fresh Parmesan, grana padano. There's a little truffle oil if you like. Oh, sauteed ricotta gnocchi with sage, lemon zest, and a little bit of Parmesan. MICHELA at MidlandCircusClub.com. Next week, I think we're going to be grilling from my backyard, so be prepared. Please reach out. Love to know what you think. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next week.